What's up, everybody? My name is Indy, and the man next to me is Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and it is Tuesday morning. And welcome to the September 2023 Indie Game Business Sessions and Meet to Match Conference, powered by Tripwire Presents, which is amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Number 15.
Number
as best
15.
we've guessed. So, but yes, no, wanted to say just a quick thank you to everybody. Before we get rolling, all of our sponsors, we've got Tripwire this time around, our good friends at Vicarious PR, and Drope Me as well. But yeah, 2 days of conferences, 2 days of sessions, question and answer. Keep in mind, we're not broadcasting on the Discord for the next 2 days because that would just be pure and utter chaos. But yeah, a huge thank you, because I can guarantee you when Dan and I started doing these things 4 years ago, we did not anticipate doing 15 of them and it turning into what we have here today. But I appreciate it. Dan appreciates it. All the developers around the world who get to enjoy this stuff for free, appreciate it. And with that, we're not going to eat up too much more of Marco's time. So first speaker this morning is my friend Marco Manoli from Slitherine, discussing how to pick a genre and stick to it. And so anyone who has listened to my podcast knows that I love a good niche product, and Marco and his team are the masters of that. So yes, with that, Marco, the floor is yours.
All righty. Well, let me slideshow. Is that? Can you see this fine? Yeah. Hopefully, yes. Right. So, who we are and who am I? First of all, thanks, Jay, for inviting us. It's good to see that somebody is paying attention to the niche. We are a company that started in 2000, so we've got quite a lot of years of history behind our back. We are looking forward to the next 25, what we do is really very special and specific. What we do is we focus very much into a single genre, which you can think of many different strategy games types, but what we do is only strategy games. And because we only do strategy games, what we have found out over the years is that, the niche of the fans of strategy is a solid niche, but it's kind of small. If you think about, the best-selling game ever in the strategy gaming genre, probably Civilization, overall nowadays, it would sell probably around, I don't know, like 7, 8, 10 million units, in all its different formats and things. But that's the size of the market in general is not huge. It's not like your, big FPSs and action games and free-to-play shooters and stuff like that. So it's a very interesting market because it's big enough to be, mass market, I would say, if you look at in the video games market as a whole, but it's small enough to be interesting to be studied in a very sort of scientific way. And what we do here and what I'm here to try and explain to you is, what are the benefits of sticking to a genre over time. And if you're a developer, like developing a technology and making sure that technology, works for a number of projects over time, and you can leverage on the learnings of that technology over time. And if you're a publisher, or if you're interested in joining a publisher, because you're looking for someone to partner with, look at someone who's specialized in the stuff you are doing. That is a very important part of what we do, is sort of give the developers we work with the certainty that will find a home for their product full of people who understand what they're dealing with. So I've been with the company for 17 years now. So all the stuff that you'll hear today is very much about what I've learned personally and what my team has contributed to make us learn over the years. I will start with the number here. It's this number that you have heard many times. It's on the press usually around February, March time. And this is a number that's here to scare us all. There's so many games released on Steam every year that we're almost like, scared by the sheer number of competitors we've got. And, that's sort of the number that, is usually used to, give you an idea of the number of different games that you're competing against. And my first advice usually to when I see these numbers, when people see these numbers, is just forget about them. This is not a competition. This is not the market you live in. Imagine if you were to launch some of you guys are doing a mobile game, there's like 10 times these numbers, even more, released on mobile gaming platforms. The idea that this is, a number that you should care about is totally wrong. This is just a number, and the mere fact that this number is big, is considered big. As I said, I've been around for quite a long time, and I remember when PlayStation 2 was around, and you only had shelf space to fight for, and the number of games that released on PlayStation 2 in 99 or 2000 was probably around 250, 300. And we still were fighting for shelf space, and we still were having the same issues with competitions that we have today. So as a whole, don't worry about it. It's just a number, and your game is not going to be impacted by this number only. This is the number of games that were launched on Google Play Store in 2022. Give you an idea of the competition that's out there specifically for Android games. The fact that we're looking at these numbers is interesting. It's anecdotal. It's cool to have. It's information that we are interested about, but it's not something that will have to scare us a lot. For the first reason that you don't have to care about the number of games released in 2022 is that the vast majority of the games that were top grossing in 2022 were not games released in 2022. If you look at the market as a whole today, the competition, the games that are a real threat to what you are trying to achieve are not the games that release day and date with you, or a month before, or 2 months before, or 2 months after. You'd have to consider that. It's a very important information that you'd have to take into consideration, but it's not the market you're up against. The market you're up against is a mix of live service games that are fitting within the genre that you're trying to tap into. There's a part of these that are games that are taking away playtime for players from other genres. Take this summer, for instance, this crazy summer of releases where there were like a load of games being released. And, really the only two major releases that made it massively were BG3 and Starfield. And because they were stealing playtime from other people, other games that maybe are not even in the same genre. So this is an important thing. When you look at your games and think about what is your direct competition, what is that you have to be up against. Look at the market as a whole, and don't be scared by the sheer number of releases, but take into consideration the specific genre you're releasing in. I find it that it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of months to look at what Party Animals has done as a release last week, because it's going to pan out as one of the most interesting case histories of the industry for this year. So I'm looking forward to looking at the numbers of that game, but also in very much in the considering what we're looking into, what we're talking about now. So genre, fitting into time of people spent in specific genre, and so on. There are in total right now about 51,000 games available on Steam. Number, one or more or less. The idea that to better research Steam these days, there are very interesting new tools that will allow you to sort of browse the different genre very, very narrowly, very, very specifically. The introduction of hashtags and tags for genre search this year has been an absolute a great introduction of a great tool. So what happens is basically that we don't have to look at do some very deep search into specific subgenres. We now have very interesting tools that allow us to track what is available and analyze subgenre in a very, very specific and accurate way. My view on especially on trying to assess subgenre is very much linked to what we do. So think about strategy games. Strategy games are a very wide genre. They go from very tactical, 2v2, 3v3 units on the battlefield, very, very specific, XCOM type thing that's increasing, with RPG elements, up to 4X, city building, management games. Everything is fitting within the strategy genre. So imagine, when we try and assess the potential of a game within a market, we have to look at very, very narrow subgenre tags, and these new tools allow us to do that very carefully. I was talking to the guys earlier before we got into the stream, and one of the questions they asked me was, what's their next big release? And our next big release is a game is an RTS, so an action RTS based on the Terminator license. Now, if you look at RTS releases this year, there has been quite a lot. And none of them have particularly been successful, in a sense that, the biggest RTS release this year was Company of Heroes 3, which as a game, performed, well, if you look at the overall, final number of copies sold. But, considering, how big a production that is, that's probably not going to be one of the most lucrative releases of the year. And then there has been a lot of other RTSs. And overall, you can actually look at the subgenre of the RTS genre and see what worked and what didn't. Last year, we released a game, an RTS game based on the Starship Troopers license, which for our standards was very successful. We sort of learned a lot from that. And the element here in play is, right, what type of RTS are people playing nowadays? And I find it very interesting to see that, because, if you look at a lot of the press like 18, 24 months ago, it was all about RTSs are coming back. We haven't been playing RTSs for a long time. Now there's a lot of RTSs coming out and the genre will be revived and everything else. And it actually didn't happen. It didn't really, pan out as expected by a lot of analysts. What happened was that the genre itself, had a lot more press. And it grew in terms of overall number of players. So there's a lot more players that are playing RTSs nowadays that are not the classic, usual Total War franchise, or the long-running StarCraft franchise. There's a lot more RTS players, but it's not like the genre exploded and became super successful as a whole, as opposed to, for instance, city building. City building had virtually no release for a long time. Then along came Cities Skylines, revived the genre on its own. And a lot of people started thinking, well, maybe this is a genre that we should tap into. And if you look at the numbers, 2019, there were like less than 10 city builders, like proper city builders, being launched on Steam. Last year, there were more than 100 city builders launched on Steam. And out of these, you can say that average sales for city builders went up dramatically. Some city builders did very, very well. Some of them without real understanding of why. There's a good example, I would say, is Timberborn. Timberborn is a good example of a game that a solid city builder with a very peculiar thematic that really did very well. On the other hand, you have a lot of these good solid city builders with peculiar thematics that didn't do anything at all, or very, very small. So in very small numbers. So what happens is that a genre goes up. You can look at average sales for that specific subgenre go up, and then within that genre, you'll have to sort of consider what's going well and what is performing less well, and then look at if there are any learnings from that. One of the cool things I was mentioning about Company of Heroes earlier on is how do we measure success? And measuring success these days is very much like a moving target. We know that developing games is becoming more expensive for some. We know that we can still afford to make big games or good, decent sized games with very, very small teams. And what I see that is an emerging trend nowadays is that the chances of being successful for a AAA title are very similar to the chances of being successful for an indie game with good ideas and good execution. The gap between the two, in terms of actual sales, but also in terms of PR exposure, media exposure, and so on, are getting the gap is getting much smaller, which means that a lot of development teams have higher chances of achieving success. And I'm going back to what success is, but achieving success than they had some time ago. The bubble of indie games has, sort of gone, in the sense that being indie is not a trend, is not a trendy word anymore. It's a fact, and a fact that with its own business rules, with its own set of standards, with its own intelligence and so on. So what makes it interesting is that being profitable, being successful, really means something that is, similar to these AAA games and to indie games. It just means that whatever makes money and gets the exposure towards a community to create a long-standing brand, franchise, IP, whatever you want to call it. What's happening out there is basically that if you look at the life cycle of games, you can actually see that it's not anymore about creating your instant success and then moving to something else, but it's really to create something that it's a lasting property on that lives years after it's been launched. And this, how to do this, how to achieve this, is very much following similar rules for everyone. I remember back in the days, if you're an indie product, you'd go to an indie website, you'd have your indie games YouTubers, you'd have your indie games distribution platforms, and so on. Now everything is merged into one. There's still differences, of course, but everything is merged into one, and really there's interest towards indie as much as there is towards big AAA franchises. Probably the only area that's very resistant to that is the traditional media websites and web dedicated or specialist websites that are still very much working as following trends. If something sells, then you'll see 10 articles about that game or more, whilst if you look at YouTube, Twitch, and else, you're actually going to see that there's a lot more positive attitude towards what's new, what's interesting, what's different, and giving visibility to other products out there. In terms of numbers, 200 titles released in 2022 made more than $1 million profit. And 2,500 titles released in 2022 made more than 10,000. The point here is that overall, it is very hard to get to the point where you're noticed, you sell the copies, you make a profit. Now, the point is that what we're trying to achieve here is get to the point where you get the visibility. And now, how can you leverage on Steam's algorithms or Steam's rules to achieve that and get visibility for your product? Now, the point is that it's all about what your product is going to be about. When I think about strategy games, the cool thing about strategy games is that you have very special vertical segments, communities, areas of the market that will be following your the overall genre. The wider market you go with your game, the harder that is, because then your competition becomes everyone else. It's not anymore about the specifics of the genre, but it's more about, will people have time and will to sort of put energies into playing my game? So if you look at the number of titles that have been released in 2022 and that made enough money, or 100 plus or 250 plus, they are all from either big franchises or from very specific genre. I'll come to an example for one of our games later on, because it's very specific and will give you a good idea of what I'm talking about. And the real question is always, what is the audience for my game? And you really have to think about that, because the audience for a game is the starting point of all your communication, marketing, and so on. And the problem we see a lot when seeing indie developers these days is that there's a lot of cool ideas around. There's a lot of stuff that we see and we think, right, yeah, if this worked, then it would be really interesting and cool. But the point is that the big idea, without a genre, without being positioned within an audience, a specific audience, will have less chances of to succeed. The job we have in marketing is sometimes seen as, right, take this product and make it sell. What I keep saying is that everyone in this industry at all levels, development, suppliers, publishers, marketing, comms, PR, content media, blah, blah, we all have one mission, is to increase the chances of success for a game. And the development area, so the developers, how they contribute to this, how they can contribute to increasing the chances of success for a game. Well, first of all, is try and find out who is potentially going to play the game and have started dialogue with these people. You can do it in many different ways, but the first thing is not actually talking to someone, but it's looking at the genre and what people are doing, what is successful, what isn't successful, and it's not a science, but it's close to a science when it comes to. But the niche, the smaller the audience, the closer you are to actually, giving accurate numbers. We've got like history of numbers that we are able to forecast based on the first month of sales, pretty much, the first year, 2 years of sales, month by month, considering promotions and things and DLC releases and so on. So the more specific you are, the more information you have about your audience, the closer you'll be to understanding what your game is worth if it didn't explode into a huge success, and then make your decisions, your business decisions, based on that. And I know it's boring, and I know sometimes it sort of limits creativity, but it really depends on which stage of the development of your company you are. If you're very start, you probably want to start with something that's safer, and then move to more experimental stuff later on when you've got solid basis to base it on, and you can start looking at very different things. But this is what we do, and this is what Kate kept us going for such a long time. Creating a solid business based on numbers and best practices, and have solid foundations upon which we can build more over time. What I keep, what I identify as number 3, elements that are going to give your game better chances is, number 1, quality. You can't it's very hard to sell a game that's not bad, not good, or isn't working for the players. Sometimes it happens. But there are very, very small number of cases when this happens, and usually, especially nowadays, players are very unforgiving. So make sure that your game is quality, and it has to be quality gameplay wise. It has to be quality UI UX wise. It has to be quality visual wise. It really has to deliver on that promise of I'm gonna give you a good game. The number 2 element is the target audience. The game has to be good for a target audience. Again, give you an example, very open here. We're going to launch a game based on the Stargate license later this year, and it's an RTT, very much like Commandos or Desperados type of game, and it's usually a genre of games where you see very complex mechanics, and it's not easy to jump into. But on the other hand, we're looking at selling this game to Stargate people. So what we try to do, I don't know if it's going to work, but you'll be our judges in this case. But what we're trying to do is merge a very large audience of fans of Stargate, very large, big, like core fans of the property, with a game that's solid but not too deep, not the thing that the fans of that genre would play and be super happy about, because we have to look at the other group of people. So merging these 2 target audiences, trying to find a sweet spot, telling a story that's Stargate, resounding in the Stargate universe, but also approaching a genre that's very well tested in the market. So I get this question asked often: are you going to sell this game to hardcore games of the RTT genre, or to the very large mixed audience of Stargate? Well, my answer is I'm probably going to lean towards the Stargate audience. That's because it's a Stargate game and I want to please these guys. But I am aware that there will be a lot of people in the segment number 2 that are going to sort of try and find their game in the Stargate game, and hopefully they're going to find it, and they're still going to find these mechanics they like. And number 3 is cost control. That's really about about how my game is going to be successful and how I can measure success and how it's going to be profitable, making sure your costs are kept under control is super important. My mantra on this is, when you look at analyzing the successful games in a genre, do that, great stuff, but also look at the very non-successful games in the genre. And it's hard to do that. It's much harder. I mean, for every, hey, I've got a new game. It's made in the, it's like StarCraft, but with zombies. And look at what StarCraft has done. It's done, 100 million units. So I'm going to do at least, 10% of that. And that's in all pitch documents. Like every pitch document is a bit of that. It's like, this game is a mix of Diablo meets Red Dead Redemption. So look at that, huge market potential, going to sell 3 million units. Then the problem is that for every Diablo, there's 100 of Diablo clones or Diablo-like games that didn't make a penny. So you have to sort of evaluate both of these. And of course, in the pitch document, you put some, in the forefront, you put the big successful games. But think about, when making a game, think about, the case when this game is not going to be successful or as successful as you wish. This will help you a lot into understanding more about, the balance between, I don't know, do I want to spend, 20% of my development budget in voiceovers or in music, or will I want to spend, I don't know, to write a game with 100,000 words, which is going to be very expensive to localize. That's all very important to take into account, especially when you look at target audience. So for instance, for us, if you look at an RPG, for instance, these people are going to be about the story, the dialogues. So it's going to be by voiceovers. It's going to be about, localization and, involvement and, getting the people to like a specific part of the game. So yes, you'll have to invest in that. If you're looking at a tactical game and somebody comes up and says, I want a big narrative layer to it, well, maybe, but not as big as you would expect, because the core of the game is not about the dialogues and the interactions and such. And there's a lot of different levels of these. You try to make your game better, but you lose focus on what your audience will want for that specific game. So pay a lot of attention to that. Make sure that your costs are under control, and make sure that you always have in mind, okay, this is my target audience. Will they want that? Well, yes, no, and so on. So again, your core focus has to be your target, your audience, whoever's going to play this game, and keep the dialogue open with these guys. Do betas, do present screenshots, present gameplay, and try and do that as much as you can. Of course, there's many other things that are part of the success of a game. Again, each one of these, if done well, will contribute to increasing the potential of your game. And it's marketing, it's positioning, it's platform, it's competition and business model, and many other things. But you could go on forever, to be honest, in here. The idea we're trying to take forwards is, provided that you've got your target fixed and your quality bar high and your costs under control, everything else is a consequence of that. So your business model is massively influenced by your target audience. Free-to-play strategy, turn-based strategy games on PC, there's no history for that. So why would I want to sort of try and do that? Competition, is there something similar releasing in a window, like very similar releasing in the same window of release we are doing? Take that into consideration. Everything else, it's like, but if you've got like fixed idea of these three elements, you're kind of a bit ahead of the curve into really presenting a game that increases the chances of its success. A bit of talk here about followers, wish lists, and some other numbers. You're going to read a lot of literature about these things, so please do that. It's a very informative set of threads, but don't get dragged into things like if I achieve 8,000 wish lists, I will sell X, Y, Z. That's not the case, or that's not the case anymore. I would say there was a lot more reliability into wish lists up until maybe a couple of years ago. Now it's like very much hit and miss with wish lists. Followers are much more important. So if I had to sort of pinpoint a number that is to be taken under close control, is followers. Followers will give you a good idea of the number of units you are going to sell of your game. Not day one, but over time you'll see that the number of game copies you sell and the number of followers are sort of comparable. There's a lot of multipliers that will make you feel like there is more of a rule there. Wish lists are very much hit and miss. You'll see, we've seen it in the recent days for a lot of games. A lot of the top wish listed games on Steam, failed to achieve these numbers. I'm not saying they were not successful, but they didn't achieve the numbers that they were expected to achieve. Some of the very low wish listers, started very well. So it's very much it's less of a rule rate these days. What is important wish list, of course, is that the more wish lists you have, the higher chances you have at release to notify people about the release, and also to be a part of the recent releases on Steam and get more visibility on day one. That's for sure. That's a rule that applies always. What I find these days very important, on top of what I said about followers, a good idea of how many people are going to buy your game on Steam, is people that are active and follow your social media. I used to work in an environment where you would try and achieve the maximum level of Facebook followers, and then because that was really the only thing that would sort of give you a way to remarket the game, and so you had like paid followers and paid media to increase the number of followers and so on. Nowadays, with Discord and with many other channels like YouTube, Twitch, and so on, you have this, without trying to push it too much, as in, give it more of an organic growth, you'll really have an idea of how many people are interested in your game. Not as an absolute number. So you'll have, if you've got like 1,000 people on Discord, then you probably have many more people are interested in the game. But you really have a lot of a good indicator from Discord of what the potential success of the game is. YouTube v Twitch, this is another important number analysis part. I would say that the important thing about YouTube versus Twitch is that these days Twitch is really for awareness only, or major driver for awareness. Very low number of people, at least in our genre, within our communities and within our sort of area of the market. Very few people on Twitch actually end up taking action, whilst YouTube converts massively better than Twitch. So if you look at what these two can do for you, Twitch is about frequency. It's about being there all the time and making sure that people are seeing your game over and over again. Awareness. YouTube is all about, the bottom part of the funnel. So more like conversions and actions towards the game. So clicking on stuff and buying the game, or wish listing and following and so on. So they're really used for different goals. And if you look into the other social media, TikTok is one thing I would recommend strongly for awareness, but also use it not as a company. Use TikTok creators to do videos or upload videos, and do like media campaigns with it, but don't rely on it to just organically drive traffic, because that's not going to happen. This is a case I wanted to introduce to you very quickly towards the end of my talk. Rule the Waves 3 is a game that we released this year. What you see in the back there is an actual screenshot of the game. There's quite a lot of interesting comments on Steam saying this game looks like an Excel spreadsheet, which in fact, it's almost like pretty clear that it is, based on a database, and it's a game that's about shipbuilding and ship construction across the years. You build your fleet, you send it to battle, and you've got an incredible amount of research in this game. It's been developed by two guys over quite a long stretch of time. So it's taken quite some time to build it. But if you're looking at a game that has been successful for what it is, profitable, pleased an audience, 92% positive reviews, created itself a little extra niche that we can leverage on for future releases, DLCs, grow the franchise over time, and so on. Made a lot of people play the game constantly. If you look at SteamDB, you can see the trends are, they're incredibly stable. The numbers of people are playing the game every day. And this is not a game that you would sort of sign if you were a publisher that has no idea what it is about. But it's a very good example of, hey, I've got a game that's super niche, that there's nothing niche than this. But, if we make sure that we don't blow our budgets, if we make sure that we follow, the rules of asking the players what they think about it, beta test the game strong, over and over and over again, make sure that we release a game that's super polished, that has no, bugs at all, and so on. Please the audience. This game keeps selling thanks to word of mouth, and I'm pretty sure that there's I'm actually sure because I know, but there's a lot of people who actually bought the game, never played it yet, because it's a daunting experience, but it's created a case. And there's a similar case of a game released a couple of years ago called Shadow Empire, again, developed by two guys, very in-depth 4X war game, but again, very high reviews from media as well, big reviews and it really was trying to address a very specific need of the market. There was nothing like that. It's almost like a kind of a dwarf fortress, but as with a 4X layer and 2D war game style. And there's a lot of games like this. There's a lot of opportunities like this if you really are looking at the audience from a different perspective. And I urge you to think about it when you think about your games and trying to understand what, especially for small teams, look at all the opportunities, look at your passions, look at your interests, and making games about these things. It's much more interesting than trying to go super generic and sell millions of copies, at least from our perspective, because that's how we built the company over time. And and we welcome the fact that there's more companies that are trying to, mimic what we're doing these days, and we hope there's going to be more. I think I stayed within my 45 minutes, so I'll sort of open the table for questions if there's any.
You did fantastic. That was awesome, and that game doesn't look like a spreadsheet. That game is a spreadsheet. Yes.
It is a huge database.
All right. So our first question comes from Sam on LinkedIn. Does this mean, relatively speaking, indies are now more profitable than AAAs if there's a diminishing gap in what becomes successful?
Well, I guess, Sam, that it is partially true. It's the fact that if you invest millions, $200 million to make a big AAA game, your chances of losing $150 million is making your risk go like skyrocket compared to the past. And indie business is made by smaller budget games that have less aspirations to make the millions. And I think that I don't think there's a study about it, but I'd be interested to see how much AAA business is losing in terms of profit over time, and how much the indie games are doing. And I think that I probably see that it's balancing out at least in terms of percentages.
And it carries over into the follow-up question of, what has changed to enable that gap closing between AAA and indies? And is there anything in addition to driving awareness that's moving that change?
I think players have changed a lot. I think that players are getting more used to play games that are indie as if they were playing games that they're AAAs. My view is that mobile games have contributed to that, into making people confronted with games that are not necessarily the best looking or the most advanced technologically, but fun and cool to play. And I think that that's a big contribution to this perception of anything Among Us can be as successful as The Witcher, and Valheim can be as successful as You Tell Me, and it's all like that, right? There's a game that was released now a long time ago, and the game called Raft. I don't know if you're familiar with it,
Mhm.
but it's like a good example of a game that was just out of nowhere became super successful, and nobody was even imagining this was going to be a big success. It just hit sort of the audience right in the face, and and people like, right, these games are all contributing to closing that gap. It's like anything can be successful nowadays, provided it hits that magical spot.
So, question from Smokeback on YouTube: when introducing or revealing your game, is it better to have a website or Steam page, or is a Steam page enough?
Well, nowadays, if you're a small studio, then just use the Steam page. Steam has now a lot of technical tools to help you track traffic and make sure that you do a lot of research on what your traffic is doing. Especially with UTM links, you can really understand how your campaigns are doing, where your traffic is coming from, and how your traffic is behaving, and so on. And also the fact that on Steam, everything is there, so you don't have to have people land on a product page and then, or a website, and then go to your Steam page to buy the game or follow the game or wishlist the game. If your game is on PC only and you don't have multiple platforms, just use Steam. It's much better.
All right, and our next one: what are your top 3 social media platforms to promote a game?
We're kind of a strange type of company because our audience is male 35 plus, so it's not like your average gamer. But for us, I would say that number one nowadays is YouTube, then Twitch, and if you consider Discord a social media platform, that's number 3. If Discord is not considered a social media platform, I would say that it is unfortunately still Facebook.
Well, that actually leads straight into the next question from Drace on YouTube: how do I build a community on Discord from scratch? How do I convince people to join a Discord server that was freshly made with like 2 people on it?
That's an interesting question. I think that luckily Discord is very much linked to community interests. So what we're doing is we're using Reddit a lot to spread the word about a Discord into Reddit groups. That does work very, very well. Naturally, now people are starting to look for a Discord page if they like a game. That's definitely one thing that sort of increases your chances of putting people on the Discord, and then use your Discord users to drag people into your Discord group, because they are the best ambassadors for the channel. That's for sure.
Drace, and I'll add in that I know I've told this story many times, but when we first started indie game business, 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years ago, Dan Indy came to me and he said, "Okay, you've got a Twitch page. Now you need a Discord server." And I'm like, there's like 8 people watching us on Twitch. Why in the do we need a Discord server? Today, that Discord server is over 6,000 people. Which, for the scope of a game, but in the sense of, what we do here for developers and all that sort of stuff, it's quite frankly one of my proudest, gifts to this industry of my entire career. So just start. You have to start somewhere.
And honestly, I think that, if you build it,
if you build it, they will come.
No.
Marco, we're old. A lot of our audience doesn't know what that movie comes from.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's
I mean,
okay.
you understood it. I'm fine.
All right. From ET Won't Phone Home. God, I love YouTube names. How to increase the followers on Steam? Is it like Wishlist, but you ask them to click on follow in your call to action?
Yeah, that's the case. We're shifting towards follow the game rather than wishlist the game. There's a lot of cool gifts you can add to your product page, with like little, actions, where to click and so on. And that does work quite well. But we're actively asking the people to don't wishlist, follow, which is much better if you're really interested in the game, because that's much better for us. It's also much better for over time. Followers get a DM, followers get much bigger presence of your updates. And because we're a company that's strongly based on main game plus DLCs over time, the more we get, the more followers we get, the better exposure we get every time we launch a DLC.
And I can say you are the first person on the podcast or the conference ever to start pushing followers over Wishlist. I learned something today, so that's always a good thing. Next one up, Smokeback. When pushing for game funding where a Kickstarter is not available or supported, is it okay to switch to look for a publisher, or is there another recommendation?
Smokeback. I'm not a huge fan of Kickstarters for video games. I've never been for a long time. I've seen Kickstarters being very successful, and the vast majority of Kickstarters being a public witness of something that fails, and it's never good. Hey, I started Kickstarter, it failed. Do I wish to do I find a publisher? I think that I would sort of start with looking for publishers. It's always the best thing to do. Unfortunately, publishers nowadays really are looking for a build to play or a video of the game before they start evaluating. But the best way to secure fundings nowadays is still trying to find a publisher. Kickstarters are good if you have something that's resounding into the Kickstarter community. So RPGs, some are type of strategy games. There are some genre that are, have better chances on Kickstarter, but usually nowadays it's kickstarting a game properly is a job. It's a huge job. And if you got somebody help you, then fine. Otherwise, really put your resources into, creating a good pitch, work on the game, and pitch it to publishers, because your chances of success, you've got a good proposition, are much higher.
All right, so that's interesting, because I usually see niche titles doing better on Kickstarter than a lot of mass market things, because of probably the same factors that go into the game. So that's interesting that y'all are.
I think that there's so many different ways of funding games these days. There's early access, there's Kickstarter, there's many other little ways of attracting funds. I guess that because of all of these things are marketing exercises. So Kickstarter is a marketing exercise, early access is a marketing exercise, and so on. If you have the capacity in the development studio to actually do these things properly, have a marketing person, have a PR person, have the resources to hire someone to do it, then I suggest that's a good way to try and secure fundings. The problem is that you'd really have that know-how. It's like designers, programmers, artists, and they don't have the marketing know-how. So some of the stuff can be a lot hit or miss.
So next up from Sam on LinkedIn, given the focus of this talk on the importance of identifying a niche and genre, Where does this leave mashup games, things like Destra, for example? Is this a riskier strategy?
Mashup games are very risky. Yes, they are. Trying to mix genres, trying to make sure that you attract to a wider audience by mixing things, usually is much riskier than anything else. Unless you come up with a new genre by mixing two genres that people like. Usually, the tendency is to try and satisfy both audiences, and the idea is that by doing that, you take the best of both audiences. And usually what you do, instead of doing that, instead of taking the whole, the whole audiences together, you just take the little narrow part in the middle and you have to satisfy them. So by trying to enlarge your audience, you're making it smaller. It's definitely a riskier strategy, yes.
From YouTube as well. At what point in development should you start bringing people into a Discord? Is it possible to get people in too soon?
I don't think so. If you've got stuff to say, it's the difference between Discord and a Steam page or anything that's public facing. That's out there to. It's that usually people you can treat your Discord community or your Discord people as your core fans that will help you grow the game over time. So if you involve them, if they're part of your development process, make them part of that. I think they'll be useful from the very, very start. Whilst on Steam, people fire and forget. They follow the wish list, and then maybe if your game releases like 3 years later, then people have forgotten about it. But if on Discord, I think if you find stuff to say, then there's never too soon.
All right, we got time for 2 more quick ones. Do you have any book recommendations for marketing?
Oh my goodness, no, I don't. I read a lot of stuff, but never stuff that's marketing related. I find, and that's not going to be very popular, but I find marketing books to be very generic and not very, practical, I would say. And because our industry is moving so fast, whatever I was doing 10 years ago is not valid anymore. I need to keep learning from things. I can suggest a lot of different websites and places to go and browse numbers and best practices and so on. That's for sure. But my best source of information is downloading numbers, downloading best practices, and elaborating on it and on them, and trying to assess what I'm doing, in a very practical way.
And Ben, if you go on, you're on YouTube. So if you go to our YouTube page, we have an entire playlist of marketing and PR talks that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not a book, but there's a lot of resources there for you. All right, last one real quickly. How polished does a build need to be if you are seeking funding to build the experience?
In my experience, not a lot. In my experience, if you're talking to publishers with experience, they will see the game not for what you send them, but for what the potential of the game is. So I don't think it's got to be a demo or a vertical slice necessarily. If you got a cool concept, something that you think might work within a specific genre, I don't think you need to be very polished. Of course, the more polished, the better. But I have seen my colleagues in the biz dev department look at games that were like pretty awful, and I was like, how can you see this is good? And they were actually right in the end. So I can say that if you're the people who are going to play the game, know what they're talking about, not very polished.
Marco, thank you so much. This was awesome talk. Marco is going to be running some errands real quick, but he's going to be back in a little bit. So if you've got additional questions, I just saw one come in on YouTube. Drop them in the Discord. We've got a special section of the Discord this week. It's discord.gg/indiegamebusiness, and all of our speakers will be around answering questions in there as well. Marco, thank you so much. We're going to be back in about 2 minutes with our next session, so stick around.
Cheers, guys. Bye. Bye-bye.